Nobody at the Grain Co-op's estate auction wanted the scale house, and the auctioneer calling the sale from the tailgate of a flatbed under the leaking elevator canopy did not pretend otherwise. Lot 14, the old Waymaster's scale house at the Dorset elevator, brick and timber, quarter parcel with the condemned pit scale underneath, no power, no heat, sold as is. Buyer clears it or buyer lives in it, Marla Teague read off the clipboard, and a man in a seed cap, leaning on the fence, called out, "That is the one that goes bang," and got his laugh. Rena Voss raised her hand from the running board of a stock trailer at the back of the lot and bid the opening $15, and the laugh made a full lap of the crowd before the auctioneer's gavel came down on the flatbed and made it hers. If anybody had told that gravel lot that within a year 600 people would stand along the elevator siding to watch a rebuilt scale beam swing level and true under a load for the first time in 33 years, the laugh would have knocked the pigeons off the headhouse. Nobody told them, nobody knew, except a man dead these 30 years and shamed longer than that. Rena signed the buyer's sheet, paid her $15 plus $11 for the recording fee, and carried off a quick claim deed and a mildewed banker's box of loose paper somebody had swept out of the scale house the year they nailed it shut. Understand what Rena Voss was that October, and what she was not. She was 26. She was not a picker or a treasure hunter or anybody with a nose for a bargain. Until the summer, she had spent 3 years as a licensed grain grader in the State Department of Agriculture's field office, pulling probe samples and running moisture and reading the load tickets and the settlement sheets. Nobody upstairs remembered the state still kept. And in summer, the field office had been folded into a regional lab 200 miles away, and they had offered her a lab bench she could not take on the pay they posted. She had $510 in a co-op share account, a rented room over a shuttered feed store that ran her $90 a week, and by her own plain arithmetic, about 6 weeks before those two numbers met in the middle. What she had that nobody in that lot had was a pair of eyes trained on old settlement paper. In her last weeks at the field office, boxing files for the movers, she had come across the state's own complaint file on the Dorset elevator and folded inside it a single sheet, a letter, addressed to the Grain Commission and stamped received the 9th of March, 1992, and never answered. A complaint in a state file is ordinary. A complaint a clerk stamped received and a commission decided to leave, lying there for 33 years, is not. It is an agency admitting something by declining to reply. She had photographed that letter with her phone before the box went on the truck, because a person who records for a living treats an unanswered letter the way a miller treats a bearing that runs hot and quiet. Something is out of true, and somebody knew it and said nothing. In the truck outside the elevator, in the flat October light, she read her photograph of it again. One page, close written, the lines pressed so hard the ballpoint had torn through in 2 places, signed Harlan Pryor, Waymaster, Dorset elevator, 29 years at the scale. The top of the letter was a plain protest, laid out in numbered points like a bill of lading, the work of a man building a case for a hearing that never got called, that the last lines were the reason any of this reached you. "I have run this scale and kept its book every load the grain moved," he wrote, "and I have kept a second book the company has never seen, and I have put it where the fire could not reach it, and where no man in a hurry will ever think to look. Whoever finally reads this and has the patience to be fair, go into my scale house and look beneath the pit under the balance knife and lift the plate that does not sit flush." She read it twice with the window down, and then she drove across the tracks to the dead elevator with the banker's box riding the passenger seat like it had somewhere it needed to be. The Dorset elevator stands where the branch line quit, a 100-foot spine of grey board rising out of a skirt of concrete silos, its headhouse blind, its driveway grown up in foxtail, the great sliding doors of the drive-through frozen, half open on a darkness that still smells, 30 years on, of dust and warm grain and the sweet rot of a thing that was full of life and then was not. At the road end of the drive stands the scale house, one room of soft red brick under a slate roof gone loose at the eaves, its front window a single pane behind a plywood sheet, and set into the floor of it the great pit scale, a platform of oak and iron plate wide enough to weigh a loaded truck, resting on knife edges over a pit a man could stand in. The plank door was shut with a hasp and a padlock scaled orange, and across it 2 boards had been nailed corner to corner and spiked with ring-shank nails driven flush, the sealing up of a company that did not want the room opened and did not expect to be argued with. The air by the door smelled of char even now, and when the wind came off the fields, a loose panel of tin on the headhouse lifted and rang, once, like a bell somebody had meant to take down and never had. At the gas station out on the state road, a heavy-set woman named Odessa Klein rang up a coffee and a sleeve of crackers and asked the question the whole county would come around to asking. "You are the girl that bought the scale house. What do you aim to do with a haunted brick? Sell the iron for scrap?" "Read it first," Renner said, and Odessa looked at her a beat longer than a stranger earns and did not laugh, which put her first on a short list of people who wouldn't. Behind that spiked door and under that pit was whatever a careful man had hidden from his own company, and the company had been so sure of its story about him that it had spiked the story shut along with the room and walked away for 33 years. The consolidation in summer had come with a moving crew and a sheet cake. A van from a records contractor backed up to the field office one Monday, and 2 young men in matching polos rolled the settlement files out on hand trucks while the district supervisor shook Renner's hand and said the future was efficiency and centralization. What the future handed Renner was a final check, a cardboard box holding a coffee mug and a rain jacket, and a walk out to the parking lot at 9 in the morning with the rest of her life gone suddenly weightless. Her people were few. Her grandfather, Alton Voss, had hauled grain off the section his whole life and had taught her, standing on the platform of a scale a lot like this one, how a beam balanced, and why a short weight was a theft you could not see, and how to read a moisture chart and never take a buyer's word for it. He had passed 4 years back, and the truck was the last of him she had. So when the auction bill went up on the co-op door in September and Renner saw the parcel number of the file with the unanswered letter in it, there was nobody to talk her out of it, and no reason to be talked out, since $15 was a figure even her arithmetic could carry. The lot had laughed at her bid in October. The county was about to hand her, for $15, the one true thing it had never bothered to read. She spent her first full day as a landowner in the reading room of the County Historical Society, in the old Carnegie Library by the courthouse, where a retired ag teacher named Wendell Hoback kept the local shelf open 2 mornings a week and had written, back in the 90s, the little spiral booklet on the elevator that every Rotary speaker in the county quoted without ever knowing where they got it. Wendell was gentle about it. Men who have been wrong out loud for 30 years often are, once they stop defending it. The Dorset elevator, he said, and had the booklet down off the shelf before she finished the name. Biggest house on the branch until the fire. Harlan Pryor ran the scale near the end until the dust explosion in 92. He is the reason it closed, hun, or so the story runs. Let the leg run choked, let the dust build in the boot, threw a spark loading a hopper car on a dry March morning, and the whole leg went up. Killed a young grain hand named Toby Selms, 19 years old, blew the cupola clean off. The company shut the house. The insurance called it operator neglect, and Pryor was the operator. They called him the Waymaster who blew the elevator, Kids used to say it in the schoolyard. He never worked another scale, never showed his face in town again, died in a rented room out on the county line. He set the booklet on the table. His granddaughter still keeps the home place. Colleen Pryor works the desk at the clinic. She will not thank you for turning this over, I promise you. That family buried it deep and stood on the ground. Rena read the booklet twice that night in the room over the feed store with the space heater ticking. And what a grain grader notices in a story like that is everything the story leaves out. No moisture readings, no dated load tickets, no document standing behind a single sentence of it. Only the sentence itself, told and retold until the telling was the only proof left. In the morning, she walked her quarter parcel with the deed in one hand and the survey folded to the plat, and it was there, in the schedule of appurtenances in type nobody had read since the ink dried, that she found the line that would matter at the end. The parcel carried the recorded rail siding easement and the certified public weighing rights for the whole Dorset spur, and there was no other legal certified scale for 11 miles in any direction on that branch. She read the line twice and set it down in the careful part of her mind, the place where a level-headed person keeps a thing that might turn out to be a weapon. On the brick jamb inside the scale house window, somebody had penciled a column of grain prices by the year, the last of them for 92, and then nothing, as if the hand had run out of reasons to write the next one down. She would get to the pit, and the plate that did not sit flush, but not with a pry bar and a prayer. If you have ever been the only person willing to want the thing everybody else was laughing at, stay with Rena Voss now, and if you want to hear what an insurance company's story had been standing on since 1992, subscribe, because in the morning she is going to lift a plate a dead man marked for her, and what was under it weighed more than iron. That afternoon she bought a wrecking bar, a cold chisel, a can of penetrating oil, and a work light at the co-op store, and Odessa Klein's cousin rang it up in silence until the work light crossed the counter. You will not lift a scale plate off its knife with a bar and a bad idea, he said. That is a Fairbanks pit scale, honey, precision iron. Silas Grubb ran the elevator crew here 30 years and rebuilt every beam on this branch, and he set the knives under that very platform when he was a young man learning the trade off the man who tended the scale before Pryor. If any soul alive can lift that plate without ruining the balance, it is Silas. He wrote a number on the back of the receipt, and under it, unasked, the words tell him it is Harlan Pryor's scale. The nails came out hard. Ring shank nails do not let go, they hold a grudge, and Rena worked the bar under each board and walked it out a hair at a time until the wood surrendered all at once and nearly sat her down in the foxtail. She stacked the two boards against the brick, unbroken. She was not tearing the place down, she was opening it. The hasp had rusted through at the screws, and the door swung inward on the second steady pull. 33 years of shut-up dark came out to meet the morning, and the morning went in past her and found the room, and it was a small, dry world laid out the way a careful man leaves a thing he means to be found. A stool worn pale where a man had sat, a shelf with a ticket spike, an oil can, and a wall calendar for 1992 turned to March, the last month he had a reason to turn a page. The great oak platform filled the floor, and in the pit below it, at the base of the balance stand where the main knife edge rode, one iron cover plate the size of a stove lid sat a shade proud of the concrete, its seam packed not with grout, but with a grey tallow-coloured grease gone hard as candle wax. She got down into the pit and put her fingers on it, and it did not move, and she made herself wait for the man who knew how. Silas Grubb came across the lot the next morning in a barn coat too heavy for the day, 81 years old, hands like the roots of a hedge tree, and he stood in the doorway a long minute before he let himself touch a thing. I set the knives under this platform the summer I turned 20, he said. Harlan Pryor kept his hand over mine on the poise the whole time, so I would learn where Zero lived. He was the most careful man on this branch. That is the part the story always left off. He climbed down into the pit slow, worked a thin putty knife around the seam of the proud plate, and smelled the grease he scraped up. Tallow and beeswax, he said. He set this to be lifted, not sealed. A man who wanted this hid forever would have run it in with grout. They warmed the plate with a heat gun off a little generator, and after an hour the grease softened and let the blade all the way around, and Silas lifted that iron cover straight up off its bed with a patience that made the work look easy. Under the plate was a dry cavity somebody had chiselled into the concrete on purpose, lined with sheet copper against the damp, and in it, sealed in a wax-dipped canvas roll and tied off in the neat clove hitches of a man who worked with twine every day of his life. A bundle the size of a case of oil quartz. They carried it up to the shelf and opened it in the light from the door, slow on the clean shop rags she had thought to buy without knowing why. 3 books, canvas-bound, the elevator's own official scale ledgers, marked on their spines in grease pencil, 1963 to 74, 75 to 86, 87 to 92, the very books the company had sworn were lost in the fire when the insurance settled. A folded oilcloth wallet of loose paper and a brass balance poise, the sliding weight off the very beam, wrapped in flannel with a strip of paper pinned to it in that torn-through hand. The poise, they said, I filed light to steal weight. Renner opened the last ledger to its final filled page, and everything the county thought it knew about Harlan Pryor began, quietly, to come apart in a brick room that smelled of tallow and old grain. Every load the grain moved, one line in a hand that never smudged, date, gross weight, tear, net, moisture, and a 5th column the company's own form did not ask for, a remarks column he had ruled in himself, where he had written the condition of the leg and the boot every single working day for 29 years. Boot clean, leg free. Boot clean, leg free. Boot clean, leg free, season on season, harvest on harvest, a man certifying in his own hand the very thing they would swear he had let choke to ruin. And on the page for the 6th of March, 1992, 3 days before the explosion that supposedly levelled the elevator, one line in the same steady hand. Boot choked on wet corn run through against my written refusal, dust heavy in leg. Reported to office in writing, ordered to keep loading. She read it 3 times. The leg had not choked because the weighmaster let it. It had choked because somebody in the office ran wet, out of condition corn through a leg that could not clear it, and ordered the loading to go on anyway. Then, the oilcloth wallet. A carbon of an inter-office memo, elevator office to Scale House. The 5th of March, 1992. Load the Selms pool corn today, regardless of moisture, cars ordered, and under it, Pryor's retained copy of his reply, refused in writing, corn tests 19 and wet, will pack the boot and choke the leg, hold the cars until it dries, signed and dated. And clipped behind those, a thing that made Silas set the wallet down flat and slow, the way a man sets down something gone hot in his hand. A state fire marshal's origin report on the explosion, dated that summer. Its finding in plain type. Ignition source overheated leg bearing under choked load, contributing cause elevation of out-of-condition grain against operator objection. Operator not at fault. The state had cleared Harlan Pryor that very year, and the report had a company file stamp on it. And the company had shut the elevator and buried the man under a schoolyard chant anyway. At the bottom of the wallet, one more envelope, gone soft as cloth from handling, addressed in the same hand. For my girl Dolores, or her children, or for whoever turns out fair enough to be holding this. Renner did not open that one. Some letters have a right reader, and she had already decided to go and find her. The silver crew cab with the out-of-county plates found her 4 days later, easing up the elevator drive slow, the way a man drives when he has already decided the ground is his. He wore new boots that had never met a grain lot and a quarter zip with an energy company logo on the chest, and he said his name was Prescott Dahl, Land Services, and he looked at the rail siding the whole time he talked, which is the tell of a man who wants you looking anywhere but at the arithmetic. He was assembling a rail-served transload terminal on the Dead Branch, he said. 400 acres, unit trains, ethanol and frac sand, financing already lined up, and the one thing all that frontage could not buy at any price was a legal, recorded, certified public scale and a clear siding easement to hang a terminal on. Her $15, it turned out, had bought the only certified weighing rights and the only recorded siding access for 11 miles of that branch. "I will give you $8,000 today for the scale house lot," he said, friendly as a loan officer. "That is a windfall for a quarter acre of scorched brick and iron." She told him it was not for sale, and he smiled the smile of a man who marks the first no as a formality. He called on Thursday at 19,000. He called the following Tuesday at 42, and this time there was a colder thing moving under the friendliness, smooth as a settlement sheet. A grain co-op can always revisit a condemned structure with a fire history on a working rail line, he said. Safety abatements, nuisance filings, that whole tedious file drawer, so much pleasanter for everyone if it never has to be opened. Renner hung up polite and sat a while with her pulse loud in her ears. Then she photographed every page of all 3 ledgers under the worklight and made 2 copies of everything at the courthouse. Wendell Hoback turned the photocopies over 1 sheet at a time in the Carnegie reading room and wanted, plainly, to believe her. You could watch the wanting move across his face, and could not get himself all the way there. "Anybody can rule a column and write boot clean in it, Hon," he said, kindly. "Paper holds whatever a man decides to put on it, and the man is the one thing you cannot cross-examine now. You have a lonesome old ledger and a memo carbon nobody living can vouch for. The county's account has a burned elevator and a dead boy you can visit in the churchyard, but he was a fair man in the bones of him, and the fairness came out sideways as counsel. If the ledger was telling the truth, he said, then somebody else's numbers had to be lying, and the state's numbers from that year, the fire marshal's own origin report, were held on microfilm at the state archive in the Capitol. And a man's opinion was not evidence, but a state seal was. She was on the interstate before 6 the next morning. 3 hours up, most of a day bent under the microfilm lamp, and there it was, exactly as the carbon had promised, the fire marshal's origin report on the Dorset explosion, summer of 1992 on state letterhead with a certification stamp, ignition at an overheated leg bearing under a choked load, operator not at fault. And filed 4 frames on, the thing the carbon could not have shown her, the company's own loading order to the branch that spring, directing that the Selms poolcorn be run regardless of moisture, over the standing objection of the weighmaster, signed for the company by its operations manager, a man named Garrett Fenn. She knew the name before she finished reading it, the way you know a name cast in bronze. Because 2 frames further on, in the record of the co-op that formed the next year to buy the elevator's grounds and rail rights out of the insurance salvage, was the incorporator and first president, Fenn Grain and Land, Garrett Fenn, the man who ordered the wet corn run now sitting atop the co-op that inherited the wreck he had caused. One of the 2 stories was a lie. Only one had been written by a man with a payout waiting on the other side of it. Home again, she climbed to the loft over the closed feed store, where the office move had taken the settlement files and left everything the moving list had not named, and she found the co-op's own incident daybook for 1992 right where a temp had shelved it the year before. person the county had folded into a moving van was still the only soul who knew where its own past was kept. The 6th of March, in the company's own hand, Boot choked on Wet Selm's corn run on office order, and the 9th of March, leg fire, 1 fatality, and then 5 lines down, in a different and later ink, cause operator neglect, Boot allowed to pack, weighmaster Pryor at fault. They had written the true order and the true choke in real time, and then, after the state cleared him, gone back into their own daybook and written the lie on top of it. A lie with a man's name in it, so the paper would say what the insurance claim needed it to say. On Sunday, she drove out a section road to a tidy ranch house with a wind chime on the porch and knocked, and Colleen Pryor opened the door in her clinic scrubs and took one look at the folder under Renner's arm and knew the whole shape of her before a word was said. "My grandfather is not a subject in this house," Colleen said, level as a filled bin. 30 years I have been the granddaughter of the man who blew up the elevator and killed the Selms boy. Whatever you have come to sell, I paid the price of it a long time ago, and I am not buying it twice. The storm door was swinging shut when Renner slid a single photocopy through the closing gap, the 6th of March page, wet corn run through against my written refusal, reported to office in writing, and turned and walked back to the truck without another word. Some doors you do not push against. You leave the truth standing in them and you drive away. On Monday, she signed up for 10 minutes on the co-op board's agenda, the 2nd Tuesday of November, purpose stated as presentation of records concerning the Dorset elevator, and Marla Teague took the form with the worn-out patience of a woman who had watched 100 people talk themselves hoarse in that room. 10 minutes, Marla said. I hope to goodness you know what you are walking into. That made 2 of them who hoped it. The boardroom that Tuesday held more bodies than it had since the last time the fertilizer levy came up. Odessa Klein poured coffee for a living, and coffee runs on talk the way an elevator runs on grain. And by then, half the state road had heard some version of what the young woman had lifted out from under a scale. Renner wore her one good sweater and carried everything in her grandfather's canvas sample bag. And when her 10 minutes came, she did not accuse a living soul of anything. She had learned that at a grading bench. A record does not need a prosecutor, it needs a reader who will slow down. She read the protest points of the letter first, in a room gone quiet enough to hear the furnace tick. She read the weighmaster's own account of the choke from the last ledger, wet corn run on office order, loading against his written refusal, boot packed as he said it would. Then the state fire marshal's certified origin report, ignition at the leg bearing, operator not at fault. Then the company's own memo ordering the wet corn loaded and the weighmaster's retained refusal. And last, the co-op's own daybook, the true entries of the 6th and 9th of March, and beneath them, in that later ink, the lie laid down on top after the state had already cleared him, and she set each page flat on the long table as she finished it, so that the board was not hearing a story any longer, it was looking down at its own hand in 2 different inks. Scylla Scrubb stood up from the 2nd row without being asked, barn cap in his 2 hands. I set the knives under that scale, and I helped this young lady lift the plate she found it under, he said. I was told the same chant every kid out here was told, that Harlan Pryor packed the boot and blew the leg, and I said it myself, God forgive me. His own ledger kept that boot clean for 29 years. I would like to quit believing the chant now, at 81, before I run out of years to be right in. The room let its breath go. Then a heavy man rose from the front row, and half the county knew him before he turned, because his name was on the side of half the grain trucks in the valley. Byron Fenn had run Fenn Grain and Land for 25 years after his father. He looked at the certified origin report where it lay on the table, and then at the daybook with its 2 inks. and when he spoke his voice had lost the ease it came in with. "That is my father's name on the order that ran the wet corn," he said. "And that is my father's company on the co-op that bought this wreck out of the salvage." I was raised on the story that Pryor blew this elevator and killed Toby Selms, and I have repeated it at my own supper table for 30 years, and I repeated it because it was handed to me and I never once thought to turn the page over. I have built my whole living on this co-op's paper. I am looking at this co-op's paper. It is lying, and my father's hand is in the lie. A chant can outlast the man it is about. It cannot outlast the book he kept. Wendell Hoback got up next, the little spiral booklet in his hand, and said only, "I wrote the version I was told. I would take it as a mercy to be allowed to write the version that is true." And Marla Teague, who was supposed to be reading ahead to the next agenda item, looked up over her glasses and said, for the minutes, that she had sold this young woman Lot 14 for $15 and had never in her working life been so glad to have undercharged. Then the door at the back of the room came open. Colleen Pryor walked down the centre aisle with a photocopy in her hand, and she did not stop at the rail, and not one person moved to stop her. "I was 4 years old the spring the elevator burned," she said. "I have spent 30 years drawing blood and taking blood pressures at that clinic, and never once saying my grandfather's name out loud in a public room. My mother spent her whole life being the daughter of the man who blew up the elevator, and it bent her in ways I am only now willing to say. This page has my grandfather's refusal on it, in his own hand, refusing to load wet corn he knew would choke the leg. He did not blow up this elevator. He is the only man on this ground who tried to keep it from being blown up." She laid her page down flat with the others. "My grandfather never once asked this county to take his word. He asked it to read his book. There is a difference between the two, and I am finished pretending there is not." The board voted that night to enter the 3 scale ledgers: the memo carbon, the weighmaster's refusal, the state origin report, and the daybook into the permanent co-op record, to correct the historical account at the Dorset elevator, and to set a bronze marker at the scale house telling the whole of it at last, with the Selms boy's name on it as a hand lost to the company's order and not to any neglect of the man at the scale. Garrett Fenn had died in 2001 with his company's name on the salvage that closed the branch. The name stays where it is. The Weighmaster's version now stands on a plate beside it, and 4-H kids on elevator day tours read both. Prescott Dahl let his options on the branch parcels lapse before the first hard freeze, and his last call carried no number in it at all, only a silence and then the remark that in 14 years of assembling land, he had never once been stopped cold by $15. And in the new year, when the co-op voted to bring a certified weighing station back to the branch it had abandoned, it hired the one person left who had read all of its books, which is how the young woman off the running board at the back of the auction lot got a key to the office that had let her go. But come out to the Dorset elevator on the first Saturday of harvest if you want the true end of it. 600 people stood along that siding exactly as promised, while a rebuilt scale beam, its knives reset and its poise brought back to zero by the vocational shop in the county seat, took the weight of a loaded truck and swung level and true for the first time since 1992, the poise sliding home to a net a careful man would have written down without a blot. Silas kept a hand near the balance stand and let Renner set the poise, slow, the way he had been taught 60 years back. The brass poise, they said, he filed light hangs now in a glass case set into the brick of the scale house, above the ticket spike and the 1992 calendar, under a bronze line that reads Pryor's scale, and the first person to step up onto the platform and watch the beam come to rest was a clinic nurse of 37 who had waited her whole life to see her grandfather's scale balance. If this story reached you tonight in a place where the world has been weighing you by a story somebody else wrote, hold on to the Weighmaster's kind of patience, the kind that keeps the book even when nobody will read it. And tell me this down in the comments, because I read them the way a grader reads a settlement sheet, one careful line at a time. In the town you come from, which one lasted longer, the story everybody was told, or the record one stubborn person kept? Say which, and say where you are watching from tonight, because next week I have another few dollars worth of trouble waiting for you. A foreclosed sawmill on a mountain creek, a boiler house nobody would go near, and a stack of company timber scrip that was never supposed to be redeemable. The evening after the reweighing, Renner swept the brick floor of the scale house, set the iron plate back over the empty cavity in the pit, and folded the weighmaster's letter into the drawer beneath the glass case. She turned down the work light and locked the door the company had once spiked shut. Out on the siding, the loaded truck rolled off the platform, and the beam floated back to zero, level and unhurried, and up on the head house a loose panel of tin lifted and rang, once, still keeping time.